Hello, everyone. It's the Historical Gamer, but you can call me Matt, and I'm here for episode number 63 of the Single Malt Strategy Podcast, joined by my lovely hosts, Tortuga. You can also call him Erik. I think he was shocked at the end of our last episode when I referred to him as Erik. And John, the Strategy Wargamer. How are you guys doing tonight?
Doing much better after you suggested a couple of games that are coming out in the next week or two. My eyes are dealing with some eye candy right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, by the time everybody's listening to this, they'll probably already be out. But yeah, there's a lot going on in the middle of November of the year 2020 as we're recording this episode. How about you, Tortuga? You're quiet over there. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing all right.
Just all right. All right. Well, I was trying to debate on like how I should refer to you guys, because I know at the beginning of our last episode, John referred to us as co-hosts. So I was trying to figure out how to like say we're all hosts without being awkward and making it all proletarian or something.
Is that a Roman word?
It didn't proletarian. I'm thinking more of like Karl Marx and communism, but
we are all equals.
We are all comrades. Oh, I should have said comrades. That's it.
Because we don't have enough Russian influence in American politics.
I'll just throw a little 3-second clip in here of the Soviet National Anthem. It's
Oh, so you're editing this one? Oh, okay, good.
I guess I'll edit this one. How are you guys? I guess I already asked that. What have you guys been playing lately? Jean, what have you been playing?
In the last couple of weeks, I've been trying my hand out in a couple of games. So Slytherin's coming out with a really cool game, which I was kind of surprised at, ICBM. So they had like some kind of Steam, I guess like fall or some kind of like special event where so many developers released like kind of demos that we can play, and Slytherin released ICBM, which is kind of the way I kind of describe ICBM. It's kind of like what's that game that was called? Oh, it's Defcon 2.0. That's the way I kind of like look at it, and it's a really amazing game. So I played Defcon, and it's okay. It's okay game. I would say it's even good, but I feel like this game, ICBM, takes it to a whole nother level. So this is a game I really, really do like more. I feel like you can dive deeper in this game than you can with Defcon. Like you can control individual units, and there's like a tech tree. There's a lot more to this game than the Defcon, which was inspired by the Wargames.
Yeah, Defcon is I actually thought Defcon was a good game, a very good game. I don't remember it having a tech tree, but you were able to control individual units, weren't you? I don't know, the feeling I got from Defcon was just that it was kind of depressing, and that's probably an appropriate theme for nuclear winter, but ICBM makes it feel much more like a war game than Defcon. It really felt like this is not a war game, this is the end. Everyone's dead. So
I think that was the intent of Defcon. I mean, I didn't play Defcon, but I heard a lot of people talk about it, and it always felt like it was sort of just this impending countdown to global destruction, whereas ICBM gives me more of the vibe of like, hey, we might win this thing.
Exactly.
We might be able to win nuclear war. Which is very much like in keeping with Dr. Strangelove, that scene where the general's in the war room and he's telling the president why they should launch, and he's like, listen, Mr. President, I'm not telling you that we won't get our hair mussed, but I am telling you no more than 20 to 30 million deaths depending on the breaks. It's just like such an absurd statement, but that's kind of what Defcon or what ICBM feels like. It's like you're the general being like, listen, I know we're going to lose millions of people, but I think we got this.
But I feel like in ICBM you can actually win. Like you can actually prepare yourself, or prepare your country to resist a nuclear bomb. I think there was like some kind of unit that you could basically shoot, basically Reagan Star Wars. I feel like you put into this game.
Yeah, they have a very optimistic view of anti-ballistic missiles in this game.
Yeah, but I mean that's something I want to talk a lot more about. I think we all can talk a lot more about ICBM. So if you don't mind, Sean, can we put a pin in that one and circle back to it? Yeah. What else have you been playing?
The other game was Aircraft Carrier Survival was it's an interesting game. So I played this right after ICBM, and I think they were part of their free kind of Steam event kind of thing. And I was more, I would say, at the onset of playing both of these games, I was more hyped to play this game. So I was like, ICBM is going to be half and half, where ICBM actually surpassed my expectations. And then when I played this, which I knew was going to surpass my expectation, it did the opposite. So I wasn't too thrilled with this game, even though it looks absolutely gorgeous. Aircraft Survival, it's basically, I'm trying to figure out a good analogy. Basically, you're the captain of this ship. You have repair crews. There's individual decks. It's kind of almost like U-boat in one aspect, where you can move troops from one part of the ship to another to do like repairs or launch, sorties. I remember when I was playing this a couple weeks ago, I had a hard time kind of getting used to the interface. Like, it wasn't as intuitive. Obviously, I did not play the tutorial or read the manual. I just figured, like, I'm just going to dive right in. With ICBM, I did the same thing, and I kind of picked it up within probably like 10, 15 minutes, and I was off to the races. This one, when I started playing it, I probably spent like an hour or two trying to, like, how does this game work? How do I, like, do a sortie? And I was doing, like, the same things over and over. I eventually figured it out, but I was like, it's not as intuitive as I would like it to be. But I'm kind of when I was playing this game, there was like a voice in the back of my head thinking, I was like, what does Matt think about this game? So I'm actually kind of curious about, I don't know if you got to play it, but I'm kind of curious what your thoughts on this are.
Yeah, I did get to play it. I had mixed feelings, less about the user interface, but I will touch on what you just said. So I played the tutorial, and I thought the tutorial was pretty darn good. To me, it's a little bit less tutorial and more like you're playing an introductory mission, but it's kind of hand-holding you through the mission. So I think the tutorial is pretty well done, and it kind of gives you a sense of like what you're supposed to click, what you're supposed to do, at least at a high level, and some of the important things to keep into consideration. So overall, I think the tutorial's pretty solid, and it's also fun in the sense that like you have a mission to sink some Japanese ships or whatever, and it's not like a lot of tutorials where it's just like, this is stupid and I'm not even playing the game yet. So I think it's actually pretty well done. I would recommend when the game does come out, if you get it, that you play through the tutorial. I had a pretty positive opinion of the aesthetics. I loved it. So it was a couple of years ago, but I got a chance to go on the USS Yorktown when we were in Charleston, South Carolina. This is the Essex Yorktown. So it's a museum ship, but it's not the Midway Yorktown. That one got sunk. It was named after that. And to me, this felt like all the schematics and everything you saw and all the cut downs where you can see like into the side of a ship. It's like, that's the game. Like you were looking at the side of an aircraft carrier with the side hull sort of chopped off, and you can see everything inside of it and men running around. And it really does give this vibe of like, it is a giant city at war. And so I think that is the game's strong point. I think there are some other really well done pieces to the game. So in order to engage enemy ships, you might get a report of where they are, but usually you've got to send out like a recon flight to like figure out where the enemy is. And then once the recon flight is out, then you've got to set up a strike, and you've got to manage like, what do you want your strike package to be? And so I think it's a little bit gamified. I definitely think the U-boat comparison is a good one there. But like, to me, it feels like the right thing, where it's like, I've got to tell my patrol where I want them to go. They've got a sector that they can scan. They can't scan everything. Then I've got to tell my patrol where I'm going to pick them up, because the ship is moving. So there's that element, which again feels really on point with carrier operations in World War II. This constant challenge of like, is it too late in the day to send planes out? Because you can't send planes out at night. Am I going to recover the aircraft? Are they going to meet me up where I'm going to be? You can actually I did some fun things where like I would tell them to go out to a hex that if I wasn't moving, they couldn't get back to the carrier. They didn't have the range. But because while they're moving, so is the carrier, I was able to have a shorter return leg and meet them like part of the way back. I was chasing after them after they were in the air, so they didn't have as far back to fly when they were returning to the ship. So like there are these little things that I think they do really well and make the game really feel right from a carrier perspective. The need to reset the deck, right? Like you've got aircraft that are sitting on the deck because not all the aircraft fit below the ship. But then if you want to land aircraft, you've got to move the aircraft from the rear of the ship to the front. But if you want to have aircraft take off, you've got to move the aircraft from the front to the rear. Like these things that are really relevant to World War II carrier operations that I think are done really well. Where I think the game struggles is communicating information about damage and about enemy attacks. So, like, as you take damage, you've got to move damage control crews around the ship to repair different damage. One, it's a little bit silly that, like, you get hit by a torpedo bomber or something like that, and a random like compartment is on fire that's like 5 decks up or whatever. Like the damage, why the damage is where it is doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. But I think my biggest criticism is that it felt like I could put a combat air patrol up to try and intercept enemy aircraft, and then it wouldn't show the enemy aircraft attacking me, but randomly the ship would be damaged from the attack. And then, but other times, if I didn't have a combat air patrol up, it would show the enemy aircraft attacking, and the ship would take damage. And that made sense, but like, I never got a sense of, do I have enough fighters up? Do I not have enough fighters up? How do I know? It gives you a value of the enemy attack that's incoming based on the size of the enemy formation, but it doesn't really tell you, like, what do I have in the air? How many aircraft do I have in the air? Like, I think that's an area it could have done a much better job in, is communicating, like, you have cap up, this is the cap value, and whatnot, and helping you manage that. So I think there are things like that, or like, it seems like I've got all the damage taken care of, but then, like, the next attack sinks me, and it says you've taken too much damage, but because I've repaired everything, I have no sense that I'm almost sinking. I'm almost destroyed. Like, yeah, there's a couple compartments that were damaged, but I repaired them, so, like, now I don't know how close I am to being sunk. So, like, I think there are those pieces of information that the game needs to do a better job of communicating information on, and I do worry it'll become a little bit too carrier decky, where it's just like, doing tasks and trying to do them quickly and efficiently, and then it translates into victory or defeat. Like, I hope it doesn't become like that, where it's just like it's an optimization of moving your planes around your carrier deck, because that I think lacks a little bit of the charm. But I think those carrier operation pieces that I was talking about, taking off, figuring out where to send your recon, where to pick up your the aircraft, figuring out how to, like, manage your strike packages, like, that all is pretty spot on, and I think could make this a really solid game. But I think they've got to do a better job of managing defense of your carrier and communicating damage and enemy vessels' intentions or whatever. And I think if they do that, this could be a really special game. But as it is right now, it's a little bit frustrating because it's just not great at communicating some of those key pieces of information.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's I didn't even realize, like, I guess maybe, I don't know if there was a tutorial. I didn't remember kind of selecting that, but I remember, like, just to realize, like, how do you, like, that I think you have like 3 or 4 officers, and they kind of judge about what kind of actions you can take. I didn't figure that out until like halfway through the game. So you have to move certain officers into certain positions in the ship to actually do certain actions. I wish that it did something like Stirring Abyss. So Stirring Abyss is a recent. It's actually going to, I believe, release this week. It's a game by Slytherin. It's one of their indie projects, and this game is a really great way that I wish Carrier this game would have taken. So Stirring Abyss does, I don't think they do a tutorial either, but they give you like pop-ups, right? So you start the first mission, right? And it says, by the way, if you want to launch this, do this. Hey, if you want to go to the left or fire a weapon, do this. So while you're doing that first mission, it kind of like guides you, like almost like a parent holding your hand, right? And then after that, like first mission, it kind of like lets go of the bike, right? And lets you fly on your own. I feel in this game that it would probably have been best for me to actually say, all right, hold on, before I play this game, let me read the manual or let me do the tutorial, and then I can start playing the game. So I wish it did something like that for a person like me that doesn't like reading. Doesn't like reading the manual or going over the tutorial.
But are you saying? Sorry, John. Were you saying that you didn't play the tutorial, but you just explained something that's like a tutorial? It's just a simple mission.
Yeah, it's part of like so when the game starts, it begins the game, right? So like the first level, the first mission is vital to the game, and kind of sets the stage of what's going on. So the story is kind of like enrapturing you, but you're also learning how to play the game at the same time. So you're not just like, all right, how do I move and then and the next one is like, how do I move the captain? All right, how do I launch a sortie? You're not kind of like learning. Not useless information, but kind of like bland information, right? You're learning the story, right? Or learning the settings of what's going on while learning the game. So I wish they did something like that versus, because I don't like going to tutorial because it's like they're teaching you how to, it's kind of like, I guess maybe a bad analogy would probably be school, right? I'd rather take the test right away and get it over with. Than studying for it.
Well, there may be a difference in how well you do in the test versus someone who studies for it, but I think that's interesting. So I know obviously we're talking about carrier deck. I recently played a game called Africa Core. It's actually SGS, which I think is for Strategy Game Studio, the developer. Africa Core, which is kind of like a board game type style. It's actually published by Avalon Digital. And the aesthetics of the game are pretty good. Like, it looks good to me. The art looks good. The map looks good. It's basically a board game, type PC game. So it looks and feels and plays like a board game. There's die rolls, there's cards, event cards, things like that. And I think there's a lot of really positive elements in the game. But what I think the game does a very poor job, at least right now, and it just released like this last week, so... they may fix some of this up. But what the game does a really poor job of is, one, there's no actual gameplay tutorial. There are video tutorials, but the video tutorials only like touch on like how do you move. They don't really tell you what you should be doing or why. And then there's a 110-page manual. And so I played it and I posted my video on the channel, and some of my comments were basically just like, this is a little bit confusing. Like, if I'm not really a board game player. And I do some. I've played board games. I understand card-driven mechanics or other things like that. But, like, the cards and what the values aren't intuitive. The tooltips help, but it doesn't really tell you what you should be doing or why. And so I made some of those comments, and the general response of, I would say about half the people are like, great, thank you for letting me know that. This is something I wouldn't have thought of, or I wasn't aware of, or maybe I need to hold off a little while before I buy this. And then about the other half of the comments were like, just read the fucking manual, guy. Just read the manual. Don't do a video on this until you know everything about the game. And it's like, okay, like, first off, everybody's looking for different things in their games or their videos or whatnot, and that's fine. If I was proclaiming this video to be like an expert interpretation of a game, that would be disingenuous, but I wasn't. I kind of told people at the beginning, like, I haven't read the manual, this is my intent of the video. But it kind of made me think, like, I feel like in the wargaming space specifically, maybe a little bit less in strategy, but in the wargaming space specifically, there's a divergence in the way that some people approach games. There is a portion of, like, sort of the groghead, wargamers who are perfectly fine saying it is okay for a game to not make sense to you as a player if you have not read the manual. You should go read the manual. And that there is a segment of people who feel that way. And then there's a segment of people, which I think is the majority of gamers, frankly, who are of the opinion that in the year 2020, if you have to pick up a manual to understand the basic components of the game, then that is a failure on the game designer's part. And Well, and I think I'm mostly in that camp. So, like, I have no problem with big, thick manuals. I play really complex games. We've talked about me playing War in the Pacific on this channel all the time. Like, there's so much there under the hood that I would never understand.
Big, thick manuals.
Big, thick manuals, complex games. Like, there's a lot there. And I don't have a problem if you say to understand how everything is occurring and why things are occurring, you should read a manual. Like, that is okay. But what I don't think is okay in the year 2020 is that if I just want to pick up a game and run a turn and have a general idea of what is going on or be able to figure it out relatively quickly and the game can communicate key information to me, you should not have to read a manual for that. And my rationale is this. If you want to read the manual to fully understand the game, that's fine. But if you're a game designer and that's the game you're designing, you are knowingly limiting the amount of people who are going to be able to access your game. You are making your game less accessible to people because the fact is game designers do not set consumer behavior. When you're designing your game, you can say you should read the manual, and that's fine, but you're not going to tell someone who bought your game who doesn't read manuals to read a manual, and they're going to be like, oh, yeah, okay. No, they're going to get annoyed, and they're not going to play your game, or they're going to return your game or whatever. Like, that's just the reality. So, yelling at people to read a manual is kind of like spitting into the wind. Like, it's fine if you want to do it, but, like, you're not going to convince everybody to do it. And I think my overarching point is this. I think from a game perspective, manuals are great, and I think there's a lot of really good ones, and I think that they are very useful to understanding complex mechanics. But from my point of view is if you're a game designer, you shouldn't design a game that requires reading a manual just to pick up and play at a surface level and have a general understanding of what you're doing. Manuals should be a reference for a game player. They should not be you have to do this or you will not even understand the basic components of the game.
Okay, wait. I think, first of all, I completely understand what you're saying. There's a lot of games that are too difficult to get into. I mean, I kind of like those games because that's usually where I shine, is a game which you have to read a manual for. I prepare for them a lot, before I make my own content. However, I understand why a lot of people won't play those games. However, I've I don't know, maybe recently started to form my opinion about this. So it's not like this is something it's not a hill I would die on, but I feel like video games are art, and even war games are art. And to give you an analogy, I went to this burger place in LA. It's called Father's Office, and they make really, really good burgers. In fact, the guy who makes the burgers, he considers what his burgers art. And to the point where if you go and you order a burger and you say, and I would like it without lettuce, or, you say, I would like it, light mayo or something, I mean, whatever, he'll say, no. My burger is an art, and this is how this is my burger. If you don't like it exactly like this, go somewhere else or order something else off the menu. And it took me a long time to really appreciate that, because at first I was like, what kind of a-hole is this guy? Where does his ego? But then at some point I was like, well, if he takes he's obviously turning people away. He's basically telling people, read the manual. But if you take your game so seriously, if you're so passionate about it, that you only want it played a particular way, and you're willing to sacrifice the customers, I mean, people can look at you and call you an a-hole, and maybe you are. Or they can say that guy has too big of an ego, but it's still their right to do that. And, in some ways I respect it, because somebody who is willing to sacrifice money to say, I only want my game played this way, because that's how my game, in my vision, the reason why I'm creating it, it should be played. I mean, I don't want to get onto the, EULA type stuff. I'm not trying to say that, people shouldn't mod games or anything. That's not really my approach. But I'm just saying, if somebody designs a game to be played one way, and he doesn't accommodate another style of play, I see that as an artistic choice. Now, I'm saying that today. Maybe next week I'll be like, no, that guy's just an a-hole. I don't know. But at least that's my viewpoint right now.
So I don't necessarily... First off, I would agree that games are art. it's been a while, but I have championed authorial intent on this. John, I know we used to go back and forth a lot where you wish games had been designed a different way, and I would say, well, they were designed this way for a reason, and, you may not like that style of game, but, a designer designs the game they want to design, and that's fine. I think my counter is, what I'm trying to point out is that I don't think it is terribly helpful if the response to someone not understanding the game is you need to read, 100-plus page manual. It's fair to say, like, a game is too complex for someone's taste, right? War in the Pacific is not a game that the vast majority of gamers are going to be interested in. That being said, I don't think Gary Grigsby should stop designing big, complex games like War in the East or War in the Pacific or War in the West. Like, these are games that are very niche, but they're also games that I think are one of a kind, and in a sense, they are art because there's no one else doing these kind of games, and they fit a really big need, I think, within the wargaming space of huge, complex games that people want to exist. My point is more of just from a UI UX perspective. If you design a game that someone can't even turn on and run a turn without grasping the general concept of what is happening, I think that's a failure in the UI UX. Not that games shouldn't be complex, not that designers shouldn't be able to design the game that they want to design, but I think there's a little bit of a balance there where, like, if the game is so complex that I have to read a 100-page manual to even be able to run a turn, like, to me, that goes beyond the point of, oh, I'm designing the game I want to design. To me, that goes into, you probably just aren't putting enough effort into UI UX, because you can still design a big, complex game that does something very specific, but it shouldn't require, like, reading a cipher, my opinion, to understand what's going on. Now, again, if the game designer says, you know what, no, that's the game experience I want, okay, that's fine. I mean, you're well within your right to do it. But I think it's something that's worth calling out on a review or a discussion about it, because that is something that matters to a lot of gamers.
Yeah, and I'd also like to circle back to what you were saying about people commenting on. So I don't think it's fair to expect people to play that way. I don't think it's fair that commenters were saying, I mean, it depends on how you were labeling it. If you were just saying that this is a tutorial or something, obviously that's different. But I'm sure this is probably like a first look or a gameplay or something like that, right? In which case, you're not, I don't know. If people don't like the fact that you didn't explain it all in the details, they just vote with their time. You just don't view it. Why? I mean, but I don't know why there would be some kind of onus on the person putting up content to have read the manual or anything like that. So
yeah, I mean, it's not like I don't want this to devolve into like, oh, they said mean things and it hurt my feelings.
You said you hate all your commenters.
No, that's not.
That's what THG
That's
said.
not what I was saying. I think that there is often a response by some individuals within the gaming industry to say that, like, to excuse potentially limiting factors in a game away by saying, well, like, oh, you just didn't get it, or like, you didn't read the manual. It's like, well, okay, you're right. I could have read the manual and I would have understood it better. That is a fair comment. However, to say that you expect everybody to read the manual and understand a game fully before they can give a perspective on a game, I think is unfair, because I think the vast majority of people are not going to do that. And I think you are making an excuse, potentially, for a objectively undesirable design if the intent of the game is to get it in front of as many people as possible. Again, it comes down to what is the game designer trying to design. If a game designer's intent is to design a game like Gary Grigsby's War in the Pacific, and the argument is, oh, this game needs to be simpler and you should just abstract away battalions and brigades and only have like one chit for entire armies, I would say that's probably an unfair assessment, because that's not what the game is trying to do. But if you argue that in order to understand why a division, what I should do with an armored division and how the combat results are playing out. You need to read a manual to understand, what the specific die rolls you need to get a hit are. That to me is like, well, I don't know why, why. Like, you could just put a value on the screen to show me what the die roll needs to be so I can understand that without needing to dig up a manual. So I think, maybe I'm picking two different items and being picky about which ones are okay or which one are not. I think it comes down to what is the author's intent, and at least in my perspective, I don't think the intent of the game is to require you to jump into a deep manual to understand some basic information that's already presented to you on the screen, as opposed to, actually changing the overarching design of the game. So that's where I think the difference is design of feedback versus actual intent behind complexity. And I think sometimes individuals just are a little bit too lenient on developers and give them too many excuses, rather than say you could create the same experience but make it better if you made some tweaks, and also more accessible and help grow the base of the wargaming community.
I think it also helps for, like, if you make a game that's very intuitive, like imagine, making a game that literally anybody can jump into. A good example, like I used before, is Stirring Abyss. I really love how they set that up. And my, I guess, take on having to read a manual, right, or go through a long tutorial is, I'm a new kind of father. I don't know if you could say new. My son's about a year and a half old, but between working, right, being a full-time dad, spending time with the family, I rarely get much time to like do anything, right? So I might get like an hour or two a night if I'm lucky, right? So do I spend that time where I have like an hour or two just to myself to read a manual, or should I spend that time just playing a game that I really already know how to play, right? Just to enjoy myself rather than learning, how to play a game that I want to already play right now. I think if you make a UX that's intuitive, where I could just, drive right into the game, instead of me reading for 2 hours, I could actually play the game for 2 hours. And to me, that's a bit more attractive.
Well, I mean, I think everybody has their own perspective of what they're looking for. I think what I was trying to convey is that the ability to communicate information clearly does not preclude you from developing something big and complex. And I think they are two different things. I think a game should be able to present to you relatively straightforward what it is you're trying to do and, sort of why things are happening, as opposed to, Jean, even based on what you're saying, a super intuitive Gary Grigsby game may not be your cup of tea because it might require an hour to run a turn. But that doesn't mean that a Gary Grigsby game can't communicate information clearly to you about what's happening. So, like, I'll use this as an example. In most of Gary Grigsby games, if you have like a fighter, either War in the Pacific or even like Bombing the Reich, if you have fighters that are attacking enemy aircraft below them, the game will tell you that. It will say like, fighters are bouncing or diving on an enemy formation. And so that tells me there's some advantage, and then the combat results will reflect that. And then that will tell me there is some advantage to having an altitude advantage over the enemy fighters that I'm engaging with. And it's a super complex game. There's a lot going on. It's not 100%, but you will understand that based on the information that the game tells you. That does not mean that Gary Grigsby needs to simplify his game, but it does mean the game gives you cues about what is occurring without requiring you to, go dig into the 300-page manual for the game. So I think like that's my mind of like developers shouldn't use read the manual as a crutch, and I'm not saying the Africa Core developer is. I'm just saying that there are ways to say there's critical feedback here to say that the game should do a better job of communicating information without necessarily telling the developer to develop a simpler game.
It's difficult. I mean, for Wargames, it's such a niche field that I'm just not at all surprised to see I mean, GUI. I think that besides AI, GUI is probably it's the second hardest thing behind AI. I think to get right in a game. It's just so difficult to be able to. I mean, it takes a different type of thinking. You need somebody who can really think in terms of how people process information.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think it's very difficult. And I think my only point is I think when you say read the manual, that kind of gives an excuse to a developer to kind of not innovate and not change and not work on those things that I think are very important to the way people experience games. And I think it's valid feedback, regardless of whether you care about reading a manual or not. I do think a developer who is able to communicate things clearly to a player and is going to be dramatically more successful than someone who is not. And I think there's a lot of war games out there where you look at it and you say, like, this game looks like it was designed 20 years ago. And I wonder how much of that is because war gamers give a developer a pass on some of these things to not solve some of the hard problems because we're more interested in some of the grit and the nitty-gritty.
No, I believe, this is my opinion, but I believe it's not that. I just don't think that there's the resources. Like, let's see. What's a game that has done the GUI stuff right? Because I even think a lot of the Gary Grigsby's titles, they're still overwhelming. Like, I don't know I have to read a manual to play Gary Grigsby's War in the West, War in the East, War in the Pacific. I can't play those. I can't pick up and play them. I mean, it's a lot of good information is conveyed. When you said that about the bombers bouncing and all that, or fighters bouncing, I take that point. Yeah, but yeah, I still think that that's not a game you can play without reading the manual, and the manual is 300 pages. So,
but I think there's a difference if you look at War in the East. So if you look at Gary Grigsby games over time. You'll look at Bombing the Reich, then you'll look at War in the Pacific, then you'll look at War in the East and War in the West. There's definitely a progression of the UI and the UX, and some people may not like this. It has simplified some things, and I think it has made some things more well communicated to an end user in a way that I think you don't see that same progression in every war game designer's products.
Yeah, okay, so that's a little different, yeah. I mean, I was just going to make the point that probably everyone already understands that there's just not enough resources in the wargaming field to get a design team. Every design team cannot have somebody who specializes in improving the GUI. It's just, I mean, there's just not enough money I don't think there's enough money in the development field to support that.
No, and I'm not. I'm not asking for game developers to make their games look like Paradox games.
Yeah.
Like I like Rule the Waves too. But I think even that game has some key things it does that give you important information about what's going on in a way that not every game does. And so that's my only point. Is that my point is that I think sometimes we do not think critically enough about how information is presented to you in a game. And I think that's a skill, and I think you're saying the same thing. Like game GUIs are incredibly difficult to do well, and I think it would behoove war game developers to spend more time and effort thinking about it.
Yeah, so I'm with you and through every one of those things you said except for the last one. I don't know if it would behoove game developers to spend more time on that, because what if they're already spending as much time as they can in order to get a hobby game out, a passion project out, before it becomes like revenue negative or something, or they just can't make the game. Or it's going to require cuts in something like another core component of the game. I mean, everything's a trade-off, right? You only have finite time. So, yeah, so I think if I was to say it this way, is this what you would say, Matt? Would you say, I think developers should take a little bit of time away from something to put more time into the UI?
To a point, yes.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Then that's a fair statement. I don't know if I agree, but
I think my counter would be that
I'll think about
sometimes I think we get too focused on the, does it include 6-inch shells and, 5.5-inch shells? Like sometimes we get a little bit too focused on the forest for the trees, and that and again, it's not every game developer, it's not something that you know, if a developer wants to focus on something, that's their right to do. I just think at an abstract sort of or an aggregate level, wargaming needs more accessibility. I would like to see more effort.
Okay, yeah, I mean, it would drive the field forward. It's kind of like one of those things, though, where it's like politics, right? If you're the person who does the long-term plan, like a lot of politicians only focus short-term because they're only worried about trying to get reelected. You know, a lot of game developers probably aren't trying to draw. They aren't thinking long-term, even though it's to their benefit to improve the wargaming field. They probably just want to sell more things now. So,
well, but I think I would argue focusing on accessibility will drive more sales than adding an extra caliber of shell type for most wargames. Again, I'm not saying that every wargame should do that. I just think the industry as a whole has a tendency to not put enough thought or effort behind UI UX design, and maybe that's an unfair assumption. You know, maybe the developers do, and they don't have the skills or the resources to do it. I could be wrong, but I still think it's a fair criticism of a game if the UI UX is indecipherable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Fair point.
Yeah, I agree.
So, what have you been playing, Tortuga?
Well, yeah, I do have a list of games. I'm glad that we circled over to me. I do have some games I've been playing lately. I've been playing one that Das Tactic has been playing a little bit about. Deity Empires. It's a fantasy 4X game. So I don't know how much of a war game it is, but it's pretty interesting. I mean, it's kind of like an Aurora. Okay, no. The best way to describe it is a remake of Masters of Magic. But for people who don't know Masters of Magic, I grew up in the time period when I should have been playing Masters of Magic, but for some reason I never did. I played Lords of Magic. I played Lords of the Realm. You know, I played other games besides Masters of Magic, but it's like Master of Magic, and for those people who, like me, don't really know what that is, it's kind of like... it's almost like an Aurora 4X for fantasy medieval world.
Speaking of games with good UI...
Aurora 4X, okay, God, yeah. And now we're having problems. Rule the Waves for... what I meant to say is basically... it's a very basic but very detailed game. I think it's not as difficult to get into as something like Aurora 4X. It's a 4X game. Deity Empires. I didn't really plan what I wanted to say about it, but I think it's pretty interesting. And for people who like Fantasy 4X and who like really complicated, detailed... let's see, not to jump back into the previous conversation, but I don't know how well they do presenting information. Yeah, probably pretty well. Anyway, it's just a game I've been playing. It's interesting. I've been playing ICBM, of course. I also, this is November 15th, so the weekend, November 14th, 15th, on Steam, This War of Mine was free to play. And I had played this a long time ago, back in super early access or whatever, but it just kind of sat and it didn't do anything. And I don't know what... Yeah, I haven't really followed what the progress of the game has been or anything, so I decided to play that again. And that's kind of interesting. I mean, I think it's supposed to be based on the Yugoslavian conflicts with genocide and all that. And I think it's like a Sarajevo. Supposed to be I don't know if it's Sarajevo, but it's supposed to be you're surviving. You, and by you I mean it's a group of 3 people, for example, or 4 people if you pick up another person. Just trying to survive in the city when it's government occupied, but they're kind of doing their genocide thing. They're killing everyone in the city, and the rebels are fighting outside to try to break in. And your mission is just day by day to survive. So during the day, you build different parts, like you build a water collector, you'll build some machine parts, or you'll cook some food to eat. And then at night, you send somebody out to scavenge to try to survive by getting more food, or at least getting more parts so you can build the stuff you need to get food, like building a trap to catch rats or whatever, then you can eat rats. It's a pretty interesting game, and it's really dark, and so I can't play it. I'm going to uninstall it, and that's it. I'm done with it forever because it's too depressing. But I really like games that make war depressing. Like I I'm so satisfied when war is depressing. I feel like it's too much glorified in war games. So
I'm kind of curious, if you don't like get food, does the story end, the game end, or does it like try to push you through so you can learn the overall intent of the game? Which I remember when Matt was talking about it. It was designed to teach you how cruel war is. So is it, if you don't get food, does the game end, or does it kind of still guide you through?
well, I mean, it's not like a yes no pass check or pass fail check. You're slowly starving to death.
Oh.
And your characters are slowly complaining, hey, they start off and maybe they're only hungry, and then they're very hungry, and then they're starving. And you know that this is there's a couple end conditions or death conditions. One's freezing to death, one's not getting enough food, and then one's, still being shot or through violence. And the first two, the non-violent ones, it's just more depressing, right? And the violent ones, you're scavenging, you're shot, or somebody stabs you and you're like, damn it. And by the way, you have 3 people, so if one person dies, your game keeps going. Things just get more difficult, and then the other 2 people are depressed because one of their people died. And I don't know, the whole situation is very dark. But like I said, I like that kind of experience sometimes, even though I was talking to Wolfpack about this, and the way I described it is, I really enjoy playing it, but I also really enjoy not playing it. I enjoy that I have played a little bit of it and I understand what it is, but I don't want to play it anymore. I get joy out of having had the experience, but no longer having that experience. It's like one of those things where I'm happy I did it, but I wouldn't go back and do it again. So that's how I would describe it. And those are the 3 games I've been playing besides my usual batch, whatever, Rule the Waves, and I played Subnautica. By the way, Subnautica, what a great game. I don't know if you... Have you played it, John? I just love that game. Oh, it's so good. It's the best. You should get it. I mean, in my opinion, I probably should just start buying copies of Subnautica for people. I think it's that good. Yeah. Oh, okay, speaking of, I've been playing Supreme Ruler Ultimate as well, and I'll probably be doing a giveaway for that. I don't know if it'll already have happened. But yeah, I plan to do some kind of giveaway stream for that. And that's another game I love, continue to go back to. So Tishi, you haven't told us what you've been playing.
Well, I mentioned Africa Core. I mentioned that I'd played some Carrier Deck that we've already kind of talked about, I think. But I feel like I'm just trying to think. So there's 2 games I've been playing a fair bit of. I guess actually 3. We'll end with ICBM because I think you guys wanted to talk a little bit more about that. But I've been playing a bit of Strategic Mind, Spectre of Communism, which is hilarious. It's basically like a Panzer Corps 2 style of turn-based, or I guess the Panzer General style of game. It's a turn-based game with 3D models of the units, and you've got a tactical map, and you have to accomplish different objectives. You've got a core of units that you carry through various battles and campaigns, and then they gain experience, and you grow attached to them and whatnot. And you fight through a series of battles across World War II. And Spectre of Communism is this is actually, I think, the 4th game in the Strategic Mind series, but this is the game that focuses on the Soviet Union. So Blitzkrieg came before it, which was focusing on the Germans. The Pacific came before that, which was focusing on the Pacific theater. And then they had a Panzer strategy game that came first. But in this one, well, in all of the Strategic Mind games, they've also, the best part of this game is they've got, instead of just reading you a briefing about what happens, which is usually like what you see in Panzer Corps or Panzer General or anything like that kind of sets up the scenario, they actually have 3D cutscenes where different characters kind of explain what's going on. So you've got a 3D, animated version of Joseph Stalin or of Kutuzov or something like that, which I think I think you're supposed to be, that's who you're supposed to be, your character is. It is so bad. It is so bad. Oh my god. The voice acting is atrocious. They don't I'm not sure if they're trying to have accents or not. It just might be their legitimate voices, but when the German cutscenes sound nothing like German guys, and the Soviet cutscenes are pretty amusing as well. And it's just like it's almost like, I forget the name of that viral movie with that actor who's sort of like a meme.
Oh, The Room. John.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like that, but like over and over again, and it's so,
Oh God.
But it's one of those things where it's like, it's so bad that I love it. The gameplay itself is fine. Like, the game is it's reasonably well done, but the cutscenes are what stands out to me as just being so bad, but that it's good. The only sort of feedback I would have is I think the color scheme is kind of a little bit too samey, where like your units get camouflaged from you, so you can't see them on the map. So like, that's my biggest gripe is it's not always clear where your units are, or like being able to keep track of them. But overall, the gameplay is pretty fun. Another game I've been playing a lot of is Unity of Command 2 Blitzkrieg, which is the first DLC pack out for Unity of Command 2, which is a turn-based strategy and wargame. Blitzkrieg allows you to play as the Germans in 1939, 40, and 41 in their offensives, and it's Unity of Command again, so it's a turn-based strategy game. Again, kind of has similarities with like the Panzer Corps model, but in this game it's more focused on logistics. So you've got to like place supply depots, supply trucks, and like manage those resources and make sure you're getting supply to the front, and using roadways or railways to ensure you get the supplies where they need to be. That is the thing that makes Unity of Command stand out, is the logistics side of the game. And it's just as good as Unity of Command 2 in that sense, except it's focused on again, a different period of time. And so I've been playing a fair bit of that, and it's been a lot of fun. And then the other game I've been playing is ICBM. Tortuga, you and I have been doing a co-op gameplay where we both played on the same team against the AI. So we had a map of like 5 AI countries, or was it 4? 4 AI countries?
Yeah, it was 4.
Versus Tortuga and I.
Who was who?
I was North America, and Tortuga was Europe. And the enemy may have been attacking me, and I may have panicked and not told my ally that I was launching a massive nuclear strike.
Which tends to happen in these nuclear wars.
Yeah, it's like, I guess if that was the case, like if nukes were inbound to the U.S., I don't know if Reagan would have gotten on the phone to Margaret Thatcher to be like, "We're launching." They may have just gone. Good luck.
Yeah, I mean, basically that was my instinct was, all these nukes are flying, and I see them flying at the enemy as well. I think it's time to get the bombers running.
That's very much the end of the world, that meme flash video from way back in the early internet days. You saw that, right, Tortuga?
Yeah.
It's about that time, chap. Fire the missiles.
Is that the one where Australia, secedes or whatever?
Yeah. It's like, and everybody's dead, except for Australia. And they'll be dead soon anyway.
WTF, mate.
But yeah, so I've been enjoying ICBM. I think the tech tree is a lot of fun. I think that adds a lot of complexity to the game.
Me too.
Oh
God.
That's like a huge part of the game, is just figuring out like what text do you want to focus on, what strategy do you want to focus on, in a way that I don't think, like, I didn't really play Defcon, but the way you were describing it to me is it doesn't sound like it was as much that. Like, this is very much like figuring out the strategy you want so that you can actually win.
Yeah, I have to say, I love ICBM so far. I don't know. Do you know what the release price for it is going to be? Is it like $20?
I'm not sure. I haven't seen a price. Comes out, we're recording this on the 16th. It comes out, I guess it's early morning on the 16th, but it comes out the 17th, but I have not seen a price.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know what it'll be. I expect it'll be around, well, I don't want to say because, well, no, I guess I'm not, this isn't a review of any way, but
I would expect $29.99. That would be my guess.
I was going to guess 20, yeah. So if it's $29.99, I still think it's worth it. I think it's a really good game, and it's got such great like game design in it. The tech tree allows you to just play in completely different ways. Like the strategies that are available to you they're so myriad. The replayability, trying a different strategy
And every country is like,
that.
or every region is such a different strategy that works best, I think, anyway. Like, when you're playing as North America, you have to have a very different strategy than if you're playing as, like, the Middle East or something like that. At least that's my experience, is because of the way that missiles travel and the trajectories that they travel and the location where you are relative to enemy targets, like, there are strategies where I think air power makes more sense. There's strategies where missiles make more sense. If you've got an SSBN, that can be a great way to get an early hit on an enemy. But if you're North America and you have to put your SSBNs along the Russian coast or, along the African coast, then they got to sail all the way back to reload. You might want to try a different set of strategies than if you're, Europe, or maybe you can just park them literally offshore your own country and hit half the enemy targets just from there.
Yeah, so before John, I think you want to say something, but let's just kind of blow through some of the technologies and like options the player has. You can do air-launched ballistic missiles from your aircraft. You can also just drop big old nukes, big old 50 megaton nuclear bombs from your airplanes. You can use ICBMs. You can use SLBMs,
submarine launched ballistic missiles.
Submarine launched
MRBMs
ones
as well, short range, medium range ballistic missiles.
That's right. And are we missing one?
For the nukes?
Yeah, or is that all? No, there's also ship-launched ones. You can do the cruisers.
There's like tactical nuclear weapons as well, yeah.
Yeah, and so that gives you a lot of different potential possibilities for nuking.
And that's just the offensive strategy. There's also, then you've got the radars, you've got the SAMs, you've got the anti-ballistic missiles, you've got satellite technology.
You got Star Wars, exactly. You got the satellites, and it gives you. I think that they're eventually, if they don't patch it, I'm sure that they'll be patching it. Well, I'm not sure, but I hope that they would patch it according to, just basically balance patch it if they find that one gameplay style is too strong, which may end up being the case. By the way, if they end up nerfing destroyers, I'm taking credit.
But I'm kind of curious, like, going to what Historical Gamer was saying, I wanted... Like, do you feel that the anti-ballistic missiles are too overpowering? Because I can never get my missiles past. Because the AI, in many occasions, just, like, surrounds cities with just an obscene amount of... Actually, it was a player I was playing against, but obscene amount of anti-ballistic missiles. Like, no...
So it kind of depends. I think there's a couple of ways. Tortuga has uncovered a strategy which is very effective. So first off, like the way this game starts is it always starts in a sandbox. And I would like to see them develop some scenarios where it's like, here's the enemy defensive network, try and break it. And like you've got a certain amount of time to develop like a offensive strategy to do it. I would love to see scenarios like that. But the way the game is right now, it's always a sandbox. So you don't have anything built. And so basically what you do is then you build your country up and you've got to prioritize research against construction. So you've got to figure out, like, do I want to build more? Do I want to research more? Then you've got to figure out what avenues you want to research or what you want to build to meet your strategy. And so while you're doing all of that, you're not at nuclear war when the game starts, but everybody's at war unless you're allied. So, like, you can send units around the map and fight the enemy with tactical forces. Once you launch a nuke, that's sort of game over and everybody starts launching nukes. But up to the point where you launch nukes, you can fight enemy ships with your destroyers, with your carriers, with your submarines. You can bomb enemy bases with your air force, with conventional weapons, and that won't trigger a nuclear war. So what you need to do, one of the things that Tortuga's found a really effective strategy is you use destroyers, and they can use long-range cruise missiles to destroy enemy land-based targets. And so, like in our game the other day, Tortuga was using his destroyers, sailing them along the northern coast of Russia, probably in areas that you couldn't sail because it would be ice, but whatever. And basically, he wiped out the entire northern SAM field of that Russia tried to build. So they were trying to build SAMs, and he was destroying them more quickly than they could build them, at least within range of his cruise missiles. I think what the game is trying to do is it's trying to force you to use a mix of conventional tactics to wear down the enemy's defensive networks prior to launching nuclear weapons. Because if you just do nothing and you let the enemy build up and you build up and then you go, you're going to see a lot more attrition in your offensive strategies than you would if you are actively, pursuing the game with a strategy to weaken certain types of defenses that will then allow your weapons through. Because when Tortuga did that, the whole northern section of Russia was basically without SAMs. And then when I jumped on it and hit the launch weapons, I obliterated all of the Russian cities up there because they had no SAM defenses. So I won the game because Tortuga did all the work.
Which, again, I take offense at that. Yeah, and I didn't even get to launch my nukes.
You did, but by the time you launched them, they were the Russian cities were like ashes, and so you had to go for like other targets. But I will also say I do think sometimes that the anti-ballistic missiles can be a little overpowered. What I found in the game, though, is that if you can get to it, it's like one of the last technologies. If you can get to MIRVs, the SAMs are much less effective.
Yeah, and also,
or the ABMs are much less effective.
And also there's something called the air-launched ballistic missiles. These are tactical nukes if you have... I pushed up to stealth bombers, but any bomber aircraft can launch these. And the range on these is really big. I mean, I think it's like 3,000 miles or something like that. It's enormous. I was taking off in Europe and not even flying over the European edge, and I was hitting things in the Middle East with them. So you don't even need to get bombers very close, which is, obviously very useful if you're trying to target SAMs. And these, one hit, their speed is very, very fast, and they just eliminate one structure at a time. You can eliminate silos with them, SAMs, air bases. I think these are extremely powerful. But what's more, I built one of those fields, Jean, which I think Matt can attest to. I had a 3 thick layer of SAMs all along the Eastern European border, and I was still getting hit through it. So there's an extremely fast ICBM. I don't know which one it is. I'm not sure if it was with the MIRVs or not, because I don't think I saw it split into 4, which is what the MIRVs are, right? Multiple. But
could have been hypersonic missiles.
Oh yeah. It would have been something like this. They were just extremely fast, and they would get through. So there are options. Also, another question for you, John. Did you use the Alpha Strike option, the plan?
No. I should have probably done it, but I abandoned the plans. I just kind of winged it. I know doing the plans is much more, I would say, efficient. Kind of sets it up for actual logistical, strategic mindset. But I just kind of, I don't know. I kind of just did things on my own. I guess maybe because I couldn't build that many missile silos. I was getting used to the game, and I guess the people I was playing with had played it for hours and hours before me, so they, with conventional weapons, kept beating the crap out of me. I wanted to ask you, though, does it tell you when whoever fires the first nuke to kind of hey, this guy started it all?
There's a noise that plays, and then the music completely changes. Also, the global contamination will start ticking up from 0 toward 100 as radiation and fallout occurs. But I'm not sure if there's something on the screen that tells you or not. I know there's a very distinctive sound that's almost like a klaxon that goes off, and then the music changes to a high pitch, high tempo noise.
And I think this timer that you mentioned, you mentioned the nuke percentage. There's I don't know what it is, contamination percentage. That's what it's called, I think.
Yeah, it basically measures global fallout is essentially what it's doing.
Yeah, and when this gets to a level which you designate, but default is 50%, when it gets to some threshold, it engages a countdown timer for the game's end. And what is really impressive to me is how consecutive it is in terms of how long a game takes. So even if you play, you can have a faster game if you want, but they got the game balance just so right that every time I played it, it has ended up being 2.5 hours for the full game. And I don't know how they probably handhold that a little bit because you can't build nukes as efficiently for the first, again, the default time I think is 1 hour. And then after an hour you can actually the percentage starts at like you're like 99% inefficient, and it keeps getting better and better, and then around an hour you're 100% efficient.
Is it the time, or is it based on tech? I thought it was based on tech. So like as you tech up, then you become more efficient.
So there is a setting in the game settings where you can set how if there is a threshold, if there is an inefficiency in producing nukes at the beginning, and if so, how long it'll last for. So I think it is time based.
We should do a multiplayer session.
Yeah, I agree. Sean, you want to play with us?
Yeah, but I'm going to get creamed.
Well, I mean that doesn't matter. But I was actually going to, if you have time, right, with the
yeah, I'll definitely. Yeah, I definitely would be interested in that. But I also wanted to say something, since you guys were Matt, you were saying something about the music and the setting. When you mentioned that, I was like, yeah, you're totally right, because the music in this is very suspenseful. That was the one thing that when I was writing down my pros and cons, I was like, wow, this is incredible. Like, it really puts you in a mood. So thanks for mentioning that. I remember that.
And can I also say that, like, this is not like a grog type war game, but this game is immaculately designed. Like, the UI in this game is tremendous in my opinion. I don't.
Well, the only issue it has is network issues, right? Which is a really big thing for a multiplayer game.
Well, I don't know how much of that is because it's like not out yet or not.
That's true. Very good point.
But you're right. We did have multiple issues where someone would get disconnected, and then when you tried to rejoin, you could only rejoin as a spectator, which is problematic to say the least. I don't know if that'll be different when they launch it, but I think this game might be one of the best UIs that I've ever seen of a game that Slytherin publishes. Like, this does not feel like a game, like a war game where it's like all the focus is on the detail and not on the UI. Like, there's a good amount of detail in this game. You know, it's not a grog war game. I would like maybe some things that would make it more of a grog war game. But like, the UI in this game is great. The visuals are great. The audio is great. Like, I really, this feels like something that, a more mainstream studio would put out rather than a studio that tends to focus on more niche titles.
Yeah, I agree. It's a very well polished game.
So I'm excited. I hope it's well received. I know when Defcon came out, it was very popular. Not like top seller on Steam popular, but certainly it was a very popular game that I know a ton of people that played, and it was much more mainstream than I think a lot of war games. So hopefully this game, touches people in the same way.
Yeah, I hope it touches
draws
them in all the right
people
places.
in and really makes them. I hope it's very successful, because I think this game looks very interesting. I think it could be very competitive. I think it could ruin a lot of friendships and also just make a lot of great stories, and I think people could really have a great time playing this game. I think very highly of it. I still get stuck at times where, like, I don't know what to do, with these tech trees. I think, Tortuga, you tend to be more focused, where you're like, I'm going to go down this line and I'm going to get the best of this, and this is going to be my strategy, and that might be the key to winning this game. I get too much into, like, well, now I need to switch over to the defensive, and I'll go with these. Oh, but what about the submarine launch ballistic missiles? Oh, but maybe we could do ICBMs, and it's just like my I get too diffuse in my research. I will also say that I think, and this is probably less so with the AI, but I'm curious to see how people tend to play this.
Yeah,
because in our games, Tortuga, people would go like 2 hours, and then they'd be like, it's time to launch nukes, right? But like, there's a variety in there where you could go for an early an early strike to say, like, enemy defenses aren't strong enough yet. I'm going to go now, 45 minutes into the game, rather than waiting 2 hours.
I think that you'll see a lot of people attacking a lot earlier. But I am interested to see how the meta game evolves in this, and I think that we will see some pretty serious evolutions of it. Because I was already, I don't know why, in the shower today, which is a visual everyone wants, but
I was gonna say,
I was, they talk about shower thoughts, but I was thinking about ICBM, and I was thinking about the different, because Tishi and I just finished this game last night, and so it's kind of in the front of my brain. And I was thinking about the different counter plays to the plays I had done, and then the counter plays, and basically it was, I imagined the meta game could go like that. Like, so I make destroyers, I do this little plan, what's the counter to destroyers? Either really good aircraft or cruisers. So let's imagine now cruisers start to become the thing, so then somebody counters the cruiser play. And then, because, now your cruisers can use tactical, you can actually launch medium-range nukes from those. So what's the counter to that? Maybe aircraft. And then, so I don't know, the metagame is, they balance the game already well enough that I think any of those could be a valid option. And I think that we'll see the trends cycle over time, which is the sign of a really good game.
Is there a setting in the game to say you can't use nukes for a certain period of time?
There is, yeah. There's peacetime mode, which means nobody can even attack tactically non-nuke. And then there's also a no nuke period as well. You can set.
Okay, that's good, because I think one thing that could get very frustrating, like I decided the other day I was playing the AI and I was just like, what if I just do a really early strike? What if I just strike as early as you can? And so I adjusted my starting point values to have 2 airfields, which airfields are stupidly expensive, by the way. 2 airfields, and then I immediately built a third, as well as researching advanced aircraft, which basically brings you from like the B-52 to the B-1. And so basically I spent the first 10 minutes of the game doing that. And then once that was ready, I attacked. And my logic was, if I go to war right away, there's no SAM fields, because you don't start with SAM technology. So the AI had in a couple of AI countries, they had researched SAMs in the first 10 minutes, but they might have had 1 SAM or 2 SAMs. So I basically just went straight to war with, a slight advantage in aircraft and with megaton bombs, and the game was over in 30 minutes because I was able to get the contamination level up, and I won. I had like 3,000 points. No other country had more than 300, because I basically had 3 airfields when nobody else had more than 1, and there were no SAMs to shoot down my bombers. And sure, they had some fighters, but again, they didn't have enough fighters because they mostly only had 1 airfield. And so I basically blitzed the AI to an overwhelming victory. But again, if that could be something that would piss a lot of people off online, who are like, I want to play a game, and it's like you end it in 30 minutes, but if you have a timer and you those kind of settings that you can adjust, you can prevent some of that meta behavior.
I mean, have you ever played StarCraft 2 or StarCraft? Any of these games, it's everything is a balance. What you're talking about is basically a rush playstyle. And it's important to have that because you want something to counter people who don't immediately invest in military. Because, I mean, in most of these games, it's a cycle where if you just slightly more invest in the economy, but you have enough defense to prevent someone who slightly less invested in the economy, you will win in the long term. And the only way that not everyone eventually just goes full on for research to try to go beat everyone else in the economy is if you're too far away, if somebody goes too much military in front of you, you can't defend. So it's always a balance. Like somebody who tries to rush in 30 minutes will lose to somebody who wanted to rush in like 40 minutes. So your strategy would lose to somebody who focused on SAMs but not getting nukes, something like that, who basically went defensive style. I mean, I'm not sure about this, but in theory, good game balance, it should work that way. And this game has all the right pieces that you can balance it and actually get it to like esports level of balance. I mean, of polish. So,
what do you guys think about the one thing that I really kind of took away from it? Again, great point, Matt, regarding the UI. I love the UI because it was so easy to kind of get like acclimated to it. Like I literally picked up the game in probably 3 to 4 minutes, which is highly unusual. But the one thing I wanted to ask you guys, what did you guys think about the 2D versus the 3D Earth? I was really kind of impressed by that.
Oh, that was so cool.
What did you like, Jean?
I would have to say the 2 things that I would say the 3 things that kind of hit me out of the ballpark with this game was, one, the learning curve. Like that learning curve.
Oh, no, I meant the Earth. Like, what did you, the map style?
So regarding the 3D Earth, I played with a 2D map. I don't know why. I did like the 3D map because it kind of, I don't know, it had that something special. It was nice eye candy. But I went to the 2D map mainly because I guess I'm more used to it in kind of games. But I love also the scrolling. Like I believe from what I remember, you can scroll out and scroll in, and it was almost like a Google Maps kind of fluidity into it. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, I like the 2D map. I feel like is a little bit more usable if you're just trying to check out a continent and where you want to put stuff or things like that. But the 3D world is so much more satisfying when you're actually at war and you're watching those ICBMs go over the caps, the polar ice caps, like they would have in a war between the U.S. and the USSR. Or you can see those ballistic trajectories, and I think you can more easily plan out your strategies and attacks on the 3D Earth. But the 2D map from like a side scrolling and just being able to sort of quickly move around is a little bit more user friendly, I think.
Gotta try that out then. But I one question I want to ask you guys: did you guys expect this at all with this game?
I didn't expect to like it as much as I do. I didn't expect it. Like this is I wonder how much I'll play once it comes out. But like this is like the perfect game with like a group of people to get together and play. Like if you don't mind being competitive with people. But I guess I wasn't expecting. I guess the thing I was hoping a little bit more for, and maybe they'll release it in DLC or post release patches, was like the one thing I am not as huge of a fan of is it's just pure sandbox. Like I think this game has the tools that like if you had a scenario to say like this is the enemy air defense, you've got a certain amount of points, try and crack it, or this is a preset to say like it's 1970, here's a pre-set up map. Now you've got like 20 years to like, figure out a strategy that's going to let you win a war. Like if there were some of those types of challenges, I think it would be interesting. I don't think they're trying to do that with this game, but I think the great balance of tactics and strategies that all these different unit types present make me feel like there's opportunity there to add to it that could be really interesting and challenging if they decide to go that route. Like I kind of had hoped there'd be a campaign of scenarios or things like that, which there really isn't.
Do you think that this game would be in the future like prime for DLC? Like, do you think they'll add DLCs to maybe do certain type of conflicts?
I have no idea. I mean, I don't know. I think, but like having some sort of, ultra challenge of like, this is a super difficult defensive network, try and crack it with a set number of points to build your armies. Like, I'm not sure I'd pay extra for that, but I do think it could add a whole new layer to the game.
Yeah, I think that would be really interesting. That would be a nice thing for them to add. But I completely agree with you on the campaigns. I wish there was I'm a big fan of sandbox. Like I love sandbox, but like I agree with you. Sometimes like I just want to kind of like get into it with everything already staged up and kind of already starting to move my forces, kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think Tortuga's right. Like this could be an esports type thing. Like it's that good, and I think that's clearly what the developer's trying to do. So, I don't know if they're going to try and add, scenarios or not to it. I just see the mechanics there and I see like, this could probably work. Like this could make some really interesting like challenge maps where it's already pre-built or something like that. But back to what we were talking about earlier at the start of this episode, like authorial intent, I don't know if that's really what they are interested in doing. And if they're not, that's fine. I just think that it could do a good job of that as well. Anyway, we've been going for a bit now, so I think we should probably bring this home and wrap this up. What do you any final closing thoughts, you guys? I don't know if you're drinking anything. I'm not. I'm drinking water. But any closing thoughts on ICBM or anything else we talked about tonight?
No, I'm just drinking coffee. But a closing thought is, I'm really kind of surprised with Slytherin. The last 2 games that they published. I wasn't expecting to like them as much as I did, and I know like I'm a big fan of Slytherin. It's just, I was in Stirring Abyss came out and I was like, oh, let me try this out. That game was, like incredible. I think that deserves its own piece in the episode, but that game reminded me of like something like Aliens. It was very, very incredible. I call it game. It was very immersive. And then they came out with the ICBM, and it's like, this is another one that I really kind of like caught me off guard. You know, I was, again, not expecting this. So whatever they're doing, keep doing it. Because, you know, I really didn't expect these indie games that, you know, are from developers I never heard of to do this. Like, it's really very impressive. So I really love that they're focusing on like you were mentioning, like they really designed the heck out of this game with ICBM, and you know, props to the developers for that. Huge props.
No, I don't really have any other concluding thoughts. I just it'd be interesting to see what happens with ICBM though, because we all have had a positive experience with it. I do suspect that it'll be much more popular than most Slytherin games. But that's just my expectation. Let's see what actually happens. I mean, I think it has the potential to be very, very popular. But, you know, it's really hard to predict these things. We'll see if it actually bears fruit or not.
Do you think it'll be more popular than Defcon?
Good question. Defcon was, I mean, part of the appeal was that it was unique. And this is, you know, a successor. So it doesn't have that same claim to fame. It's better. It's a better game than Defcon, for sure. But... And I mean, did you look at the reviews for Defcon on Steam? I think it got like a 9 out of 10 or something. So.
Yeah, no, I haven't. But I mean, I don't know. I think a big part of it comes down to how effective they are at marketing, but to who? Because I don't know that, like, there's definitely a segment of the Slytherin customer base that probably aren't super interested in a game like this.
Yeah, they need to market outside their normal base, really.
Yeah, so like this is much more mainstream than I think a lot of their games. So I think it comes down to how effective they are at getting the word out and marketing this and getting people to try it. You know, this screams to me as the kind of game that they, and I'm not like streamers like me, but like they
yes,
they should really try and get like folks like Quill or just main streamers.
Oh my gosh, that's exactly, you took the words right out of my brain. I was thinking, you know, this is be the perfect game for them to get Quill 18 to play. Yeah, something like that. You nailed it. I completely agree. This would have, I believe it would be, whatever they would pay him, it would be a great return on investment because it's got the legs, right? If people play it, I think that they're really going to enjoy it.
It's the kind of thing that like a streamer crew should play together too. Like, you know, I watch Classy Pax, who's a Canadian sort of variety streamer, does mostly mainstream stuff. But he also does a lot of like co-streams with other really big channels where they stream with like 4 or 5 guys in a Discord type chat as they're playing a game, you know, together or against each other. Like, this is the kind of game that, like, you could do that. You could show, like, people ribbing on each other, the back and forth, the, you know, that kind of an experience, which I think will sell itself. But I think this is the kind of game that, given Slytherin isn't in the mainstream as much, they need to get it in front of people. You know, like, if EA releases a game, I don't know how much streamers drive sales of EA games because they've got such a marketing reach that like everyone's going to hear about it one way or another. But like Slytherin needs to have some of those grassroots partnerships to get this game out in front of as many eyeballs as they can. And I think if they can do that well, this game will sell itself.
I mean, who would have? I'm just kind of still surprised. I mean, who would have thought? I mean, like, honestly, I thought Slytherin's big game of the year, or at least of the fall, would have been Starship Troopers. I would have never thought an indie ICBM would be able to get to that. I mean, I could see this being on the front page of Steam. I
mean, I think to Tortuga's point, like Defcon was, right? Like, this is the game that has that potential. I think it's a question of whether it finds the audience. The other thing is, like, and I'm not great at this, like, Defcon was a really popular game in the time that it came out, and it fit the time that it came out. I don't know if gamers are in the same space looking for the same sort of thing now as they were when Defcon came out. Like, there's an element of unpredictability or knowing where gamers are now and what experiences they're looking to have. You know, the market shifts and moves, and the types of games people are looking to play for shifts and moves over time. So we'll see. But I think we're all very positive about it, and that I think if people see it, I think they'll see the opportunity behind it, the potential behind it, and I think this could be a really, really great experience for people to play, you know, against each other. Yeah, it seems like cooperative games where people stab each other in the back, cough among us, are the kind of game that people are loving right now, and this to me feels like the kind of game that could really fit that.
Yeah, I completely
But I think that's a great spot to leave it. So, it's been great talking to you guys. It's been a little while since we recorded our last episode. I know the CK episode probably just went up recently, but it's been like more than a month since we've recorded our last episode. So, had a really great time talking to you guys. Until next time, this is the Historical Gamer. You can call me Matt, signing out for Jean, the Strategy Wargamer, and Erik, Tortuga Power. Until next time, we're out.